Let me find a little test file I can use to play with this thing. I think I had
Sure.
Downloads maybe. Yeah, this is a nice, easy test file. That's good to play with.
What version is this you released?
2011-15. It's basically the date.
Can you okay. Also, this way you are setting out the numbers of the releases with the date?
Yeah, so there's a naming scheme.
Okay.
Effectively, there's 3 stages that are planned. The first is this one, which we are in now, 0.0. something. And basically over here, everything is very unstable. The quality of the software is relatively low. There are expected to be bugs. And the objective is just to keep on building features. And in fact, how about we just start the recording and we can chat about this stuff?
I started. I just did not introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, you can cut that bit out then.
Hello, Dion. Or not. Hello, everybody, and welcome.
That's all right.
Okay, I'll start.
Okay,
now.
don't cut this part out. No, that's cool. That's all right. We can keep this banter.
Yeah, it can be.
So
it can keep it real, right? But yeah,
that's right.
Welcome to a new chat with Dion Moult, the main developer of the add-on BlenderBIM, or BlenderBIM add-on for Blender. So what do you want to show me today, Dan?
Yeah, I'll talk you through one of the new features in the latest release. So that's 0.0.201115. And this is kind of a weird versioning scheme. So I'll explain that a little bit, because people look at those numbers and say, what's wrong with this guy? He can't count. So the way it works is that's basically the date. It's 2020, November the 15th. And that's because we're in version 0.0.x. And in this series, we're planning to release extremely often, every 2 to 4 weeks generally, and keep on creating features. And we won't be too worried about breaking backwards or forwards compatibility. And if we introduce bugs, that's okay too. The objective is just to continuously experiment and build some features and get people interested. And once all the basic features are there, and this is kind of defined as all the features you need that you can actually say, yes, I can run a project now, from beginning to end with BlenderBIM. We're going to move on to version 0.x.x. And this is where we'll start counting properly, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. And this is when we'll start polishing the features, and we'll do more testing and improving the usability and writing tutorials and all that type of thing. And then hopefully this will be done in sometime 2021. And then we'll move on to the next milestone later, which is version 1. And that's when we consider it to be a stable product, and we can very confidently say, yes, this is a battle-tested tool. You should switch 100% to free software, and you can stop using proprietary tools.
Intriguing. I'm looking forward, really looking forward to that day. What about the first stage? We are in the first stage. How much, like percentage-wise, how much do you feel that it's completed from what you hope to achieve in this stage?
I can't give a number, but what I can say is I think that we'll move on to the next milestone sometime in mid to late 2021. But keep in mind that, but this is for the whole package. So there'll be some parts of BlenderBIM which are more mature than others, and some parts of the add-on which are less mature. So I guess it depends on your use case.
I see. Yeah, that sounds good. What happened yesterday? You released a new update.
Yeah, that's right. And if you go to the community forums here, there's a thread where you'll be able to find the release notes. And on this page, you can see all the various releases. We're on, I think it's on page 2 somewhere. And there's a whole bunch of new releases here, new features and new fixes. And this is pretty standard. For every 2 to 4 weeks, you'll find this. And it'll be too long to talk about all of them. But I think I'd like to talk about one particular feature, which is this one here, the IFC Inspector feature, because this feature starts letting you use free software in an educational environment for teaching the concept of openBIM, and not many applications have this. XBIM Explorer, which is another free software, has the same feature, but the issue is that it's not cross-platform. And it's not an authoring tool. So now you can have it within your authoring tool and cross-platform. So it's really exciting that we can hopefully start seeing tools like BlenderBIM used in more universities who have an openBIM related course.
Interesting. Yeah, that sounds good.
So I'll start with a basic file here. And what the inspector does is it lets you look inside an IFC file. So if I go file, export this and call it test.ifc, and I'm going to open this with a text editor now, and the Blender has a built-in text editor, so we'll use that for now. Test. Let's see, here we go. Turn off my filters. Okay, so this is what an IFC file looks like inside. And there are multiple ways that an IFC file can look like. So this is one of them. We won't go into the details too much. And you'll notice that an IFC file is just a text file. So you can open up with Notepad or WordPad, and you can read all of your BIM data just like text. You don't actually need any BIM software to look at the data of an IFC file. You can read it. But this is a little bit hard to read. But hopefully there's some things that pop out here, like units. So there is a length unit, which is set to meters. Or, for example, you can see that this is an IFC4 file. And you'll notice that the file has many lines, and each line starts with a number with a word after, which explains a little bit of data, which is stored in the file. So this file stores data about units. It stores some coordinates or Cartesian points. It stores something about geometry, which we won't go into. I can see material in here, so there's some materials being defined. There's a postal address. There's a building in our file. And all of these things are little bits of IFC data inside the file. And what this, when you try to teach openBIM from a technical perspective, it's important for people to understand what these things are, you know, whether you can have a building or a coordinate. And once you do have a building, what types of data can be stored with a building. So for example, here you can see my building. This is the name of the building. So understanding that is pretty important. And this new feature lets you dig into a file and discover that. Is that making sense? Sort of, maybe?
Yes, sure.
So because this is not a feature really meant for end users, it's hidden a little bit. So it's in the scene properties, and you scroll all the way down into the IFC debug section. And it's called the inspector. And you can, once you've exported an IFC, or if you've set an IFC over here where it says IFC file, you can click on the browse icon and browse to an IFC file. But once you have an IFC file set, then you can use this feature. So the easiest way to use it is I can type in a number here, which corresponds to the number at the very beginning of each line. So for example, this building is 50. The number is 50, so I type in 50, and I can press inspect from step ID. And that was strange. That didn't quite work.
You get some grams and kilograms there.
Yeah, that wasn't what I was expecting. Clearly, there's a bug somewhere. but
but
that's
isn't
okay.
okay? Yeah, sure.
Not what I was expecting. Let me check if I've done something correct, right or wrong. Well, that should have worked, and that should have given you number 50. So we'll try again. And maybe there's, what have I got in this file? Test and IFC. That's a bit odd. We'll try this one here. I think I know why this is the case. We'll cut this bit out and we'll redo this.
Nah.
Nah, we won't. We'll show all the
Raw
bugs.
is best.
Raw is best. Okay, so we'll try it again. And let's see if I can. Let's see if that's working. There we go. So now it's working. So that issue is because I actually had another file still in my Blender memory. So when I restarted Blender, it worked. So anyway, now it's working. Now it's pulled up the IFC building, and you can see all of these attributes associated with the building. So when you look at it in this form, you can see things like a list of values. You can see this bunch of funny numbers, and you can see my building. But here it actually interprets it for you. So it knows that this bunch of funny numbers is actually the global ID. And you know that it can, and you know, by the way, all of these $signs, that means that no data is stored. Nothing is stored there. And this one actually elaborates on what those things are. So owner history is set to nothing. It's not stored. There's no description of the building. There's no object type of the building. And all this stuff is set to none, which means that all this data is missing on the building. And that's one way of learning about what's possible. And you can see here that one of these is a little bit special, called object placement. And this is the location of the building. So where it is in 3D coordinates. And you can see here that it says it's got a reference to another bit of IFC data. Yeah. And whenever it finds one of these, you can press on this button, which will jump to that piece of data. And this lets you dig further inside an IFC file. So let's see, it's object placement. I can click on that. And now you can see that the placement is relative to a certain location. And it has a relative placement attribute. And we can click on that. And inside that relative placement, it has 3 attributes: a location, an axis, and a reference direction. Now, the location is a coordinate in space, and the axis and reference direction are 2 vectors, which we'll ignore for now. But the location is pretty easy to understand. It's a 0, 0, 0. That means our building is at the coordinate 0, 0, 0 in the 3D world. And I just so happen to know that it's that's exactly where it is. So that's correct. I'm skipping some of the details here, but hopefully this makes sense, that you can dig into the data. And you'll notice that I can press back to jump back to where I was. Yeah, what was that?
No, I was thinking like who needs to use this at work, for example? Who would need to use this, and why?
So I don't think this would be something you would use on a regular basis. One reason you might use this feature is if you were teaching openBIM. So it's a very good way of explaining the attributes, as well as some more special types of attributes, like these things here that are called inverse attributes. And we won't go into the details of these now, because that would be a course in openBIM, but it's a good way of graphically visualizing it and browsing through an IFC file. So,
and
for example,
technical one.
A very technical course. Correct. This would not be for the average BIM user. This would be for people really looking to dig into the guts of BIM data and how to manipulate it. So I guess another really useful scenario is if you wanted to debug why an IFC file is not quite doing what you think it should do. So when a shape is not being created correctly, or you think there should be a relationship that exists in the BIM data, but it doesn't quite exist, this is the tool you can use. And this tool is really good because it doesn't lie to you. Many IFC viewers out there, in the interests of making it seem easier for users, they sometimes rename attributes or add new attributes or even generate new data. Like one example is they might show volumes and length values and areas of objects. And that might fool you into thinking that the IFC file contains quantities, so you can do quantity takeoff from it. But in reality, the IFC file does not contain quantities. It's actually calculated by the viewer, and that can be very misleading. Or another example would be materials. You might see lots of objects with colors, and you'll assume, oh, this IFC file has all the material data stored into it. But by inspecting this, you can realize, actually, no, this doesn't have any materials associated with it. So for this one, for example, if I click on an object and I select this in spectrum object, this lets me graphically click on an object, so I don't need to type in these magic numbers like 50. I've pulled up the object, and I can see that this object is contained in this particular spatial container, and I can go into it and I say, okay, it's contained in a building story. Okay, good. Now I know that's correct. Whereas sometimes it may not expose that relationship. So you might think it's nested inside an aggregate, or it might collapse the tree. And this is a good way of for somebody who's really digging deep into an IFC files to know exactly what's happening with no
I understand.
sugarcoating.
So this is very advanced feature. Do you have any other more basic features that you included in this update?
Yes. let me find one. Let's
or
talk
do you
about
want
one.
to show me more about this, more advanced? If you can do
well,
it.
I think this is pretty much it from that perspective. What I do want to highlight is that the BlenderBIM add-on takes it very seriously not to try to add decoration around IFC data. And this is something that's extremely different from other BIM applications. For other BIM applications, most of how IFC works is hidden from you. And as a result, even if you don't mean to, you can accidentally produce quite low quality IFCs simply because the default position is to hope that the application is exporting or importing or analyzing it correctly. Whereas in the BlenderBIM add-on, we don't do that. So I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. So here, this object, I can see that it has an attribute global ID. And if I go to the object properties, and this is the user-friendly interface that users will be using, you can see that it has attributes global ID. And this one is a nice, easy way of users to see the same attributes, but it's all cleaned up. You know, it's hidden all of the ones which are set to none. The fact that it's contained within a building story is shown up here in the tree, so I can see that it's inside the ground floor. So it's much more user-friendly. And so I guess everything I just showed you, which looked highly technical, is also visible to the user in a much more friendly way, just like here. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a ground floor, and here's one attribute. And this one has a drop down, right? I can select, I want to add a description, and I click that, and I add a description, and so on. Yeah, I guess hopefully that kind of makes sense, that there are two modes, but it doesn't hide. But I've hidden the other mode, the advanced mode. That's why it's all the way at the bottom, and you have to expand out this debug tab.
Yeah, it's much more intuitive in the above one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and most users will be using this side of things. Mm-hmm. And if like materials, right? They can select a material, they can pick a drop down, or if you want to create a new material layer set. So this is actually one of the newer features in this release as well, which is much more friendly to users. You can see it has a much improved way of representing materials. And in IFC, there are 4 types of materials you can assign to an object. Should we talk about this now, or
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So, an IFC in materials is something which is highly misunderstood, and hopefully with this add-on, it will improve a lot. So, for example, there are 4 types of materials you can set to an object. The first is a single material. So one object, one material. It's pretty straightforward. And then you have a constituent set. And what this means is that the material is made out of many submaterials. So one example would be concrete. And concrete is made out of many subcomponents. Like it would have a certain portion of cement, and it would be marked as a percentage. And it would have another little portion of aggregate inside of it. And so that would be known as a constituent. So for example, I can create a constituent, and I can call this concrete. And I can add one particular constituent, and we'll rename that one and call it, I don't know, cement. And we'll add another constituent, and I'll create a new material here, and we'll call this one aggregate. And we'll say that one's aggregate, and we can name them and say this is, X percentage, let's say. It's obviously not 10% and 20%, but you get the idea.
Yes.
And so this is a much more friendly way of managing materials. And all this stuff is exactly what IFC has supported for over a decade now. So it's pretty well established. So similarly with layer sets, so these are like layered. The most typical usage would be a layered wall. You have an outer layer of a finish, and then you have a load-bearing layer, for example, maybe some insulation or something like that.
Yeah, but if the aggregate and the cement are constituents, isn't the concrete constituent set?
Yes, correct.
I think
so.
You said
Concrete is
constituent.
Concrete is the constituent set. Sorry if I said it incorrectly. And then you would have multiple constituents within that set. So one would be aggregate, the other one would be cement.
Yeah.
And this is actually, there's a really good page on the wiki about this. Where's the wiki? Here we are. So the wiki is great. You can learn everything on the wiki. And if you can't, well, let us know and we'll write more about it. And there's a link here that says how materials are stored in IFC. And this explains everything you need to know. So it says, all right, you can assign a material directly, but there are 3 types of composite materials that we call material sets. And it explains the 3, and then it gives examples for them and what types of properties can be associated with each one.
Yes.
I didn't talk about this type of constituent set, which is where instead of it being mixed, like in a mixture, like in concrete, you actually have an explicit geometry for each constituent. Like a window would have a piece of geometry that represents the framing and a piece of geometry that represents the glazing. So
yeah, it makes
hopefully,
sense.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go and load up a file here, and let's see how this goes. And we're just going to see whether or not this has any material data. So you can see there's lots of colors in this file. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not materials are stored in this file, because this is a common misconception. Just because you see colors doesn't mean there's a material stored. In IFC, you're allowed to color an object without actually giving it a material. And you can even give the name, the color a name, and that misleads people into saying, oh, I got material stored, but actually there is no material. So you can see I've clicked this wall, and under the object material, it's empty. There's no data. So this brown colored wall, in fact, all of these things actually have no material assigned to it. aha, the window does. So that you can see here, the window has a constituent. It's got the window frame and the glass, but it has, no name of that constituent, and it's missing a description. And this just kind of highlights the situation of BIM data nowadays. People think they're generating BIM data when in fact, most of the time, a lot of that data is missing or incorrect, which is a big shame. So this one here, I'll show you what I mean. The material is blank, but if I go and look at the style is named brick, common. And what this means is that the style has been given a name, and people might look at that and say, that sounds like a material, which it is. But the program which this was made in, which starts with the letter R, has incorrectly.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I shouldn't. I won't.
You're a handful.
Yeah, but that's kind of why it's important to have tools which really show these things properly, and don't hide what's actually going on.
Yeah, that's true. But it may be that the closed options, the closed softwares might have these properties, but maybe when they are exporting to IFC, they are not exporting it right as it should be.
Maybe, absolutely. And the thing to do is whenever you're working with your software, and I really advise you to try opening it in BlenderBIM and poking around. And if data you thought should be there isn't there, go and search for documentation. Maybe it's an option that you've missed, because sometimes there are a lot of features, but it's hidden from the user. The user has to go out and find it. In BlenderBIM, it's easy, because everything, as long as you press these buttons, your IFC will be correct, because there is no separation between Blender and IFC. But in other programs, it's important to search for those features. And if you don't, like for example, just on a more practical note, there are ways to report back to the developers. So this is a great way to report any issues you have with this. I'm just giving this as an example because that was the bug, similar to the bug that we just saw.
Sure.
And you can click on the Issues tab and you can press New Issue here. So if I search for material there, you can see that there are quite a few issues. So for example, if you find missing properties, the answer is that it's just not supported yet.
Yeah.
But this was in January, but they were just certified. So we're hoping that in the new release, which I've seen a lot of good things in the code so far, hopefully that will be resolved.
Yeah.
So it's exciting times.
Yeah, definitely. Now, show me some more features. We have 5 minutes more.
More features.
Make it quickly.
Okay.
With some that are most related to, let's say, design, not necessarily only in the nitty-gritty things.
Design.
I see Sverchok something there. It was a problem with a node.
Yes. So Blender, which I might even have disabled right now. I'll enable it. So enable Sverjok and the IFC collection for that. You can use visual programming within Blender. So and this is called Sverjok, which I think is Russian/Ukrainian for cricket. And it's heavily inspired by Grasshopper. So I can create a new node tree, and I've got a whole bunch of nodes here related to IFC features. So I can read a file, and we'll go and enter in a file path, and we'll go get my test.ifc file and link it in there. And the new feature, this is still a very basic set of nodes. They essentially do what you can do already with programming very simply. And they're not really mature yet, but it lets you extract pieces of data out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the update was to do with the by type node. And the by type node lets you pick all objects of a particular type. And I know you asked for a design feature, but this is not yet ready for design use. But it's got a drop down in it, so we'll go with that.
Yeah.
So if I hook up like a viewing node or something to here, I can say, all right. In the past, you had to type in your class, and this is similar to how some. And the problem with typing is that people type it wrongly and they make spelling mistakes and all that. So now there are all these drop-down elements, and this was a good feature done by Long, one of the contributors. And so, for example, I can actually, this file doesn't have any walls. I think it has a building element proxy in it. So I'll click, oh, it's got a building. So, but I'll start with the building element proxy.
Mm.
So you can see here that after I select that, it's picked up my one object, which is a cube. And now I can go spatial element, and let's say I'll pick up the building instead, or the building story. And if it had multiple buildings or multiple building stories, I'll see multiple here. And if I want to type a manual thing, I haven't actually tested this, so we'll see how it works. There we go. It's picked up all the vectors in the file.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a usability thing. And this is what happens a lot in the BlenderBIM add-on. We kind of just build something, and then over time, we make it easier and easier for users. So in the original version, there was no drop-down. You just had to type things in, and that was kind of painful.
I see. Yeah. Well, it looks good. It leads to less mistakes, and it's more intuitive for the newcomers who are willing to try. Yeah. So
absolutely.
Good job.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It ended up being a way longer video than we anticipated, but it's going to be a nice one, a very detailed one. I won't cut this. I will leave it exactly how it is. So
okay,
let's go wild. Thank you.
We'll go wild. All right.